Hi, Rajeev. We're live.
Hey,
Welcome to Venture with Grace. Um, so to start the show, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by LG Nova. Get ready to ignite your passion for innovation at the fourth annual InnoFest, happening at the iconic Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco on September 25th and 26th. This two-day event brought to you by LG Nova is your chance to dive into the future with industry leaders and cutting-edge startups shaping health tech, AI, clean tech, life science, smart life, mobility, and more. And here's something extra special. I'll be hosting a panel at InnoFest, guiding a dynamic discussion on the future of AI and the workforce. Join me along with other thought leaders as we explore the trends and technologies driving innovation and positive change. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity to be part of the conversation and help create a brighter, more innovative tomorrow. Register today at innofest.alginova.com and be part of the movement at InnoFest 2024. Okay, to start the show, Rajiv, I want to say I think you have one of the most amazing portfolios. Like recently you have invested in a unicorn Glean, and then you have invested in Monday.com, Squarewise, Segment, to name a few. For the audience who may not be familiar with your journey, like why don't we start with what did you learn early on in your career, maybe prior to Sapphire, or since you have worked at Sapphire for over 10 years, like what were some core lessons that you have like took early on that kind of shape you into a great investor today?
yeah, no, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Grace. A pleasure to be here talking to you and the audience. I guess, gosh, there's a lot there in the question. Where to start? So I actually started my investing career nearly 15 years ago. I was at a firm called Silver Lake, which at the time, and maybe still is the world's largest solely technology-focused investment firm, or so in private equity. Incredible experience just learning all things about software businesses, predominantly being able to really understand what makes a business tick, and just really have that depth of rigor. I often joke that that was my real business school experience with Silver Lake, and not my business school that I did thereafter. But it really also, though, informed me not just how to do diligence on a company, but what I really liked, which was growing businesses and growing markets. At Silver Lake, it was genius things that we did, but it was more around financial engineering, and maybe slower growing markets, still incredible businesses. I worked on one growth equity transaction when I was there, and that just made me really excited to kind of look at late stage or growth stage venture coming out of business school. And now, because you mentioned being at Sapphire for a long time, you're correct. You know, when I joined Sapphire, it was almost a dozen years ago, and I was maybe the 10th total employee, including everyone all in the firm. And now we're closing in on 100 employees, believe it or not. So we've experienced kind of tremendous growth. We've been fortunate, really to retain kind of an entrepreneurial spirit and feel. Everyone's still working hard and agile and supportive. And as we were back when I joined, I think the two things, though, when you talk about learning lessons that I've learned at Sapphire, that make for, I think, good investments generally is one, or an investor is one, to maniacally serve the founder and CEOs that I work with. Nothing else matters. I mean, Grace, our product is money. We're selling money. You have to differentiate in some way. And so the way I try to differentiate, although many people do the same, is by just always being on call, adapting the ways I work with different founders and CEOs, trying to provide value to them, trying to find answers even when I don't have the answers. I think that matters as referenceability to win the new investment. So that's one. And then two, in a similar vein, I learned that, listen, beyond the metrics and a great product and even customer feedback, all that matters, even at the growth stage. And I don't think a lot of people quite understand that even when a business is mature, 50 million or 100 million of ARR, is to identify and back exceptional founders and great teams. They will figure it out through thick and thin, and that's all that matters, even at the growth stage, to generate really outsized returns, which is what you still need even at our stage of investing.
Totally. I really like what you said about even for the growth stage companies, like a lot of it where, you're still focusing on the people of the team as well as in general, like, there's a lot of like I feel like you're serving the founders, like you're really focusing on like a lot of these like fundamentals. I think that's really great. And why don't we start with like, since like I feel like AI has been like the topic of 2024. You have invested in some like really great AI companies, including like Glean, which is like most recently it's like a really big run. When you met the founder, they were kind of you met them at like a breakfast or like lunch. I don't remember. It was like
Yeah.
a food place. So like I wonder, so like what how did you kind of interact with the founder early on to help you like follow their journey to now investing in them in the latest rounds?
Yeah, I met Arvind several years ago. It wasn't at his prior company, but it was early on at Glean. And one thing I like to ask, and many people do, is just why you started a business. Why are you working? Why are you spending 12
Mhm,
hours every day doing this? What's exciting about it? And every founder is different. They all work incredibly hard. Some like to sell and talk to customers. Some like to just build products.
mhm,
Some do it for other reasons. And I think through asking these questions and really being in listening mode mostly during those first few conversations, you just learn what really excites, an individual, what really motivates them, their true intentions. And I think through that, you can learn how to build a genuine relationship with them, right? And how to add value to them, how to keep in touch with them. What do they really care about, and how do you connect with them? So no, I mean, super excited about Glean. Have seen Arvin execute on the business now for several years. Both Supio and Glean actually come in very different flavors. Glean is a horizontal AI
mhm,
platform. They're really aiming to be the enterprise AI
mhm,
business that kind of rules them all, that can supercharge productivity for every knowledge worker across the planet. And when we did our customer work, we were already sort of realizing that customers are using them that way. But most importantly, it was really sitting down with Arvin, over a couple of hours at his office and hearing the much longer term vision, which I don't even know if he
mhm,
shared more broadly, of what
mhm,
he believes that to be. And I like to say it's rare I leave a meeting feeling like there's a 50 billion or even $100 billion market cap company that's waiting to be built in some time frame. And I think Arvind really wants to do that and is onto something that big. And that's what resonated mostly with him. In addition to, by the way, him having particular expertise, having co-founded Rubrik, being a VP of search and distinguished engineer at Google, and attracting world-class R&D talent to the company to execute on that vision.
mm. I wonder, so like I really like what you said about like the founder has like a really big vision. And since like I feel like that's a pretty later stage rounds, like what were some metrics that you feel like are important in like the later stage? And since some of the listeners may be like earlier stage investors, like what are some common patterns that, since you have invested in some of the most like iconic deals, like what would you say would be like some lessons that like the earlier stage investors could take away to like help to like filter out like who can kind of like make it to the stage that you are Sapphire investing?
Yeah. And just so folks know, just to double click a little bit,
Mhm,
Grace, on Sapphire, we're a growth stage B2B software
mhm,
focused venture capital firm. We manage over $10 billion of capital. We've been investing for over 2 decades.
mhm,
Um, all we do is focus on B2B software businesses, from infrastructure to applications that have proven product market fit. So that could be as early as 3 or 5 or 7 million of ARR, and as late as 100 million of ARR, or pre-IPO rounds, as we call it.
mhm,
Um, our mantra here, just to set the framing, is to partner with exceptional founders that are building what we call companies of consequence. So these are companies that can be category defining businesses that are multi-billion dollars in scale, enduring companies that are impacting multiple stakeholders on a global scale. Companies like DocuSign or LinkedIn, ExactTarget, Looker,
mhm,
MuleSoft, Monday.com, Square, and many others over time. So for what I look for in metrics in particular is frankly no different, I would say, than any enterprise software investor. Maybe we'll get to this, but our business has become rather institutionalized
mhm,
over the years. But obviously great momentum in the underlying business, not just headline growth, but on a month by month or quarter by quarter, is that momentum even further sort of inflecting, or is it sort of decelerating? I tend to look at that, as well as the efficiency, both the sales, the capital efficiency, and then the ultimate retention of the business. These are the core 4 or 5 metrics that we all look at. In addition to those, what I would tell any early stage founder is, right now, any later stage investor, any investor on the planet, including Wall Street software investors that are waiting for the next set of IPOs, what they're seeing are thousands of companies that all feel kind of similar, right? They all can't be absorbed by the public markets. They all can't be bought by M&A and by big strategics. And then you have so much capital, folks like us, flooding into a certain sort of a still rather small ecosystem in some ways, in terms of number of companies in the venture ecosystem, that it's creating 10, 12 companies in every subcategory. So if you're a young company, you're starting a company, you're growing your company, think about the why now and why you. What's different? What's different about your story? Either the approach you're taking or the space you're playing in. Of course, we know that execution and founder, everything that makes sense. But if you're just starting new, start with a problem set, I think that's kind of unique, or approach that's unique. So when you can envision yourself at 100 or 200 or 300 of ARR, and you're about to sell your business or go public, there's a story there that people want to pick up on, versus being the next iteration or one of 5 companies that's already out there in the universe.
I really like what you said about, like, there is, like, some of the objectives, like month by month or year by year metrics that you would be able to kind of like lean towards. But like, I wonder when it comes to like identifying the company themselves. So like, since you also just mentioned about like a little bit about like, there's a lot of company that could have like a similar trajectory in like the later stage run. How do you kind of differentiate like which company actually would be able to execute on the really big visions? And like, I also wonder, so like from, since you also invest in like Supio, like I feel like that's more towards like the earlier stage. Can you speak on like, how do you kind of like leverage the later stage lens to apply into some of these like sub sector of the AI or like SaaS category?
Yeah. It's interesting. We invested post product market fit. So yes, Supio was a Series A investment. But to me, given the momentum of the business, the number of enterprise size law firms and deal size that were coming inbound to them because their product and solution was so good, we believe it still had product market fit. And so we invested in the company, and a lot of the same metrics. We may look more month on month and more granularly at an early stage investment versus quarter on quarter or half year on half year growth at a later stage, much bigger company like a Glean. But outside of that, we're looking for product market fit. In AI companies in particular, I think spending a lot more time with the customers and parsing and reading between the lines a little bit with the customers is important. And what do I mean by that? There's a lot of customers, when you do customer calls of a particular AI vendor, they're expressing some level of excitement. They've seen the demo. They're working on adopting and using the first maybe module or little piece of functionality that particular vendor is providing. And they're excited about it, right? Just like how we were all excited about first using ChatGPT. That doesn't mean that excitement is particularly durable, that will last 1 year from today. If there's 3 clones, or if that company does not innovate and never goes beyond that first piece of product functionality. So we really spend a lot of time with customers asking them, what exactly are you using? How much are you using it? How would you define the return on investment? How much time is it truly saving you? Why is this different from the other 3 competitors that you've evaluated? Why do you feel like this particular company can be your partner in this AI journey that you're inevitably going to go on, which, by the way, every company is so early on that just being a thought partner to these businesses is the most important thing for a Supio and for a Glean. Those are the questions that we found we've double clicked on a lot more,
Mhm.
because unless you wait till much later stages, then you have renewal rates and retention that you can kind of have enough data. But if you're investing at 5 million or 10 million of ARR, or some of these companies that have only been around for 2 years or 3 years and are growing really quickly, you don't have a lot of that data. And so you kind of have to really talk to customers to try to predict it.
I like really like what you said about it's kind of like asking the customer and then getting the quantitative like our qualitative data.
Yeah.
And I wonder when it comes to like quantitative data and the qualitative data, like how many of the answer that you kind of have to taking in from the customers also like to also match with like the number metrics on like how much income they're generating. I wonder what would be the balance of that, like is it like let's say you chat with call it like 50 customers and then like everyone's like raving to I feel like that's like a really good metrics, but I feel like a lot of the startups would have maybe um a very few set of like the whale customer that they're like loving the product, but on the other hand there is also like a bunch of customer that they're like just testing things out, since it's also AI is like a very in a very earlier stage, especially in the I feel like in like the law firms, like I feel like people are kind of like scared of what if like are my jobs gonna replace by AI, I'm gonna try
Right.
the 400 products that's out there. How do you kind of digest these kind of information internally to pull the plug for investment like this?
Yeah. It is. So taking a step back, I think people have a and tell me, Grace, if this is not what you were asking, but people
Mhm,
have a perception, even in the ecosystem, that growth stage investing is more about the metrics and the numbers. Just rely on the numbers, and you price the company
mhm,
and you try to win your investment in it. I felt like that as well 10 years ago, 7 years ago, even.
mhm,
But what I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years, something I said earlier, it's actually a lot more about the qualitative.
mhm,
It's a lot more about whatever pattern recognition. Hopefully, you've invested in some good companies. You've seen what's worked.
mhm,
Maybe everyone's invested in some bad companies or
mhm,
bad investments, and it hasn't worked. And you use all of that, and you have your own sort of gut instinct. It sounds sounds bad, but even at 50 million, 100 million of ARR, a very small portion of the investment decision is just the numbers. At some point, every company has pretty good numbers, and maybe one metric is okay, and the rest are kind of good. But then there's so much beyond that. And it's not even the market sizing, it's how can they expand the market. And so it really comes back to these qualitative assessments you get from the customers.
mhm,
Yes, we take an NPS score, but any good company is going to score 8.5 out of 10, or 9 out of
mhm,
10, or
mhm,
8.2 out of 10. It's all within a tight band. Everything
mhm,
else is an easy pass for us, or the qualitative assessment of the founders. And like I said, for me, I would say that's criteria number one, two, and three is how
mhm,
good are the founders, and therefore how well can they, Grace, articulate with clarity of thought their story, their approach, their differentiation, and their vision. Right? If they can articulate it in a very clear and compelling way over a 45-minute conversation with me and my partners, they certainly can do so to attract the best employees on the planet, right? The best management team. They can do so to attract the best customers, and they will be able to do so to attract the best investors, even after I invest for future rounds.
mhm,
And so to me, that's all that matters. I mean, it's
mhm,
probably 50-60% of my investment criteria has
mhm.
even driven back to the founders or founder and CEO of the company.
Totally. I feel like that's such a great way to frame it because I feel like as you know, I like you just said, I think like as a earlier stage investor or like angel investor like myself, like I feel like most people imagine like the growth stage are like primarily based off the numbers and like just basically the data out there. But like you mentioned, like it's also about the people's quality as well as like kind of like digest like why they're building a certain business and basically like having an understanding of like why some certain number exists is like maybe more important than the numbers themselves. I wonder when it comes to like the whole AI category, so like since you have invested in like we just talked about like the legal AI company as well as like Glean. I would say Glean's more towards just like the general SaaS
Yep.
category. Like, how do you think about like the different AI trends within the current SaaS ecosystem. So we have like the agentic AI related things, and then there is a lot of different vertical SaaS, and there's like a bunch of other new trends. Like, what are some like trends that you feel like actually have longevity to live in the entire SaaS ecosystem longer than what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, no one quite knows. It's a bit of wild, wild west.
Mhm,
I will say from a Sapphire perspective, I mean, we've tended to stay away from the foundation model investing
mhm,
largely. It's rather capital intensive.
mhm,
Generally as a high margin, high scale software investor, that hasn't been for us. We have invested in the picks and shovels layer with weights and biases. We're looking at a lot of AI security businesses, but it's interesting that middleware picks and shovels layer actually um, feels like there's slightly less activity there than there is at the AI sort of application layer, right?
mhm,
And again, at the AI application layer, you're right, there's vertical and there's horizontal. For us, we take a very similar approach than we do to any other investment, right? We want to make sure, in particular, as I mentioned earlier, the customer feedback, the business fundamentals, the ROI that these businesses are driving is fundamentally durable and
mhm,
sustainable. And we do see that across a bunch of these businesses. I think the most successful ones are deeply rooting themselves in their customers' context and data, really understanding through integrations or others what is it about their customers that makes them unique, because you can't
mhm,
just slap chat gpt on top. It's not going to be able to
mhm,
understand. It's trained on the internet and not on any particular specific customer problem or customer industry problem. And so when I talk to customers, I think about that, like, how are you solving that piece of the puzzle? And then, it honestly, some of it is old school sort of engineering
mhm,
and other software functionality. Are there dashboards? Are there integrations? Are there
mhm,
other interesting pieces of workflow, especially as you get into more agentic type of use cases? Are these customers, versus having a chat interface back and forth, can you actually trigger actions and workflows that are happening in underlying systems? That is starting to happen with some very lightweight reasoning. We're early on that, but that's certainly something that's exciting for the future.
I wonder, so like I wonder, since like you mentioned about I feel like there is a lot of like customer data, like, so you have to focus on the customer in general as a company, and then there is a lot of domain expertise around the like, or like the domain specific data that you have to maybe like focusing on, instead of just like focusing on the general data. So I wonder, since like I know that like maybe we don't have to talk about the specific niche of like, I know that like you and your firm have published a few articles on the design aspect, or on these like other different subsectors. Is there any particular subsector that you are spending a lot of time on, since like, we can start with like the legal, since like I feel
Yeah.
like CPO is like kind of like towards a legal category.
Yeah.
How does the industry work, and then like how do you think AI can actually make a difference in something like that?
It's a great question. I mean, I think Supio is a great case study. Yes, we are, by the way, spending a lot of time on
Mhm,
sales and go to market AI. It's a great
mhm,
use case as well, design, and then legal and healthcare in terms of
mhm,
verticals. And happy to talk about healthcare as well. But an example there
mhm,
on legal, I invested in Supio. I think it's a really interesting vertical AI company. They're taking a unique approach. It's a vertical I spent a lot of time in, and it lends itself, if you think about legal, very well to AI use cases and solving big pain points. What they do, though, it's interesting at its core, is taking unstructured data from documents and PDFs and structuring it, pulling out the right entities, extracting it, structuring it into the right sort of chronology and order. And interestingly, when you think about that core technology, they are using some LLMs, and that's part of their secret sauce in order to do it a little bit faster in the
mhm,
background.
mhm,
But a lot of it is unstructured to structured data
mhm,
transformation that has been out there. They've just innovated on it, but that has been out there for many years. They're just doing it a little bit better. Once they do that, They have a whole bunch of LLMs and AI that can allow you to chat and query that data, that can allow you to develop certain outputs that lawyers may develop, certain types of letters or settlements or what have you, and give you the right answers. But that core, if you think about it, is they are using some AI for it, but 50% or more of it is just sort of um, older technology, right? Transforming
Mhm.
unstructured into structured data. And so that's a great example. Even Glean, if you think about it, their original and they're still their search lends itself to amazing AI use cases of what you can do afterwards. But it's really a knowledge graph, and yes, there is some vector search database in the back, but it's not necessarily LLMs that's powering the search itself, right? There's just now they've applied a lot of AI around that search experience to enable other workflows and actions to really come to life. And so that's what I look for. I look for AI to be sort of an enabling or supercharging technology around these products, but not the core product itself. If the
Mm,
core product is just AI and how to generate an image using Midjourney, that's not going to be at least an enterprise
mhm.
solution that's enterprise grade.
I I think that's really interesting to like you said, like AI is enabling or supercharging something that like becoming the core technology in the SaaS space. So I wonder, since like there's a lot of different legal companies that exist in the like AI legal space, um how do you like I guess like how do you find like Supio to be like better than a lot of these other companies, since like they have inbound demand from these bigger companies like
Yep.
but typically like in the space I feel like to selling it to the law firm is kind of like really hard, or like selling it to any like any bigger enterprises are taking like a really long sales cycle. Like how do you think
Yeah.
about the business model or like the product differentiation for
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. I'll say a couple of things there. Again, on the actual product and technology, Supio is not a chat interface on top of um,
Mhm,
some existing sort of data set. They're
mhm,
creating a metadata, a derived data
mhm,
set by
mhm,
structuring unstructured data. In their case, it's medical records,
mhm,
PDFs. And so by doing that, that creates a differentiated data set that they're already sort of creating through hard work
mhm,
and annotation and automation of that annotation and all sorts of amazing things that they're doing. And then allowing you to query or search or interact with or generate new documents out of that derived data set. So because it's not just a generic data set, it
mhm,
is already differentiated. The other thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of AI businesses that almost inherently need to be services uh, um, oriented, and I think that's okay because everyone's just trying to figure it out, and this is the kind of the system of work. And I can talk about that framework as well. I think though there's a little bit of a difference. I like to say here internally between a technology enabled service business, which some folks in legal AI are, versus a service enabled technology business. Yes, it sounds hokey and kind of nuanced, but one
mhm,
is at its core a technology business that has some interesting pockets of services that they're doing in order to become more scalable and more of a technology business. And the other is at its core a services business that might have some technology they're using here and there, but they're still a services business that might be hiring lawyers to do the work. Supio
mhm,
is the former, which I liked. I looked at their headcount. What are people actually doing? What are they actually working on? And they were working on things to make the product and technology more scalable in the future versus working on the direct output for the customers. It's a bit of a nuance, but in AI, where AI is effectively the system of work, you're seeing a lot of people throw services at it to sort of make it work for their
mhm,
customers in the early days. And I think that's okay. But I think you need to have that nuanced framework to ensure
mhm.
you're backing a company that can scale over a 5, 7 year journey by doing things the right way in a scalable way once they become more mature and at scale.
I really like that. Like, so, like, you know, um, basically, I feel like it's more towards like, um, again, like using industry, like, so for example, like they are focusing on like a medical transcript and, like they, after, like basically, like the AI is like not the core technology here is more towards like servicing a specific subsector of the business. I wonder, like, how do you think about, like, since like also you invest in um Livongo Health, so that's like towards um helping people with diabetes to kind of like navigate them, or like kind of like detect them early to a degree. Like, so for the like, since like in the healthcare space, I feel like um different type of like software is even harder to be implemented to the healthcare ecosystem.
Yeah.
Um, can you give us an overview on like maybe how did you discover the company, to what are some major trends in the healthcare space in general on how people are adopting AI?
Yeah, I think healthcare is another super interesting space. Obviously, invested in Livongo and Sword Health and a bunch of others, more recently Verse Medical. But on the AI kind of native healthcare side, healthcare contains just an enormous amount of administrative work.
Mhm,
If you think about revenue cycle management, right? The fundamental way that healthcare providers can go to insurance companies, insert very specific codes and names and criteria and images in order just to get paid. That's an enormously manual, but sometimes very rote sort of process that takes some auto filling of names and some document summarization and others, an understanding of the payer systems just to get paid. If you think about prior authorization, the ability for a provider to work with a pharmacy and make sure that the medicine actually gets in the hands and is adhered to with the end customer, which has benefits for the whole ecosystem. There's a lot of these workflows that I'm seeing a bunch of startups come up and start to knock down one by one. That's really interesting. I think where we're seeing a lot of interest right now is this. You mentioned about medical transcription space. So I'm no doctor, but from doing some
mhm,
market work, a big portion of any doctor's day is spent on administrative work,
mhm,
on inputting into their EMR exactly, hey, I saw Grace. Here's actually, what her conditions are. Here are her symptoms. Here's her background. Here's what I recommended. And from what I can tell, I don't think doctors like to do that. I think it's prone
mhm,
to error. They do it at the
mhm,
end. It makes physician burnout. They're spending a big portion of their day, just like how salespeople in technology don't like to go put stuff into CRM, which by
mhm,
the way, AI will do too. That's happening in the healthcare setting to a large degree. So now there's a couple of startups that are attacking that and selling to some of the
mhm,
largest healthcare systems kind of in the United States, which is
mhm,
unheard of. Because as you just said, healthcare providers don't adopt technology that fast. But because of AI, they're interested in it. It's a C-suite discussion. And if it actually works, it could really sort of take off. And there's a couple companies really taking off in that space. I'm seeing, Grace, honestly, AI in all sorts of spaces, from data security and different verticals, attract sort of pipeline and attention. My biggest worry is that if you have 100 companies that are generating a lot of pipeline because they have AI in their messaging, how many of those 100 actually have products that not just work, again, to a small degree on day one, but by day 365, they're still providing value. They're still innovating and expanding. They're still beloved by their customers, and they will be renewed. That's where we're early for most companies to really see that evidence. And that's why it makes it tricky to invest in AI, and you really got to dig deep with the customers.
mm. Um, like you mentioned, I feel like a bridge is like one of like the famous one in like the medical transcription space. And like you mentioned, like there's a lot of companies that are um using AI on a lot of things, but not necessarily every company is able to like solve the customer's problem. And I wonder, for like these different subsectors, how do you kind of like quickly um find the right customer? Like, is it like, I assume, I'm sure like the company will provide you with their like
Sure.
great customer base database, so you can talk to them to diligence like the how they're using a certain device or like a certain software. And like I wonder, how do you kind of like spend your day on different subsectors, since like they're all like, the CRM, like the healthcare related things, and then there is like the legal
A
subsector. There's
lot. It's a lot.
there's a
Well,
lot.
that's why I love this job. There's so much, right? I learn about new from personal injury law to yeah, healthcare transcription. You can learn about it all in a day. I mean, at Sapphire, we've been doing this for a couple of decades. I've been doing it for some time too. You do inherently develop a network, right? I know a few CIOs of hospitals. Now I know some folks that work at big law firms. You also, like you said, get introduced by CEOs of companies that you want to speak to their customers. And if they're confident in what the customers have to say, they'll openly and gladly introduce you. There's also a whole host now, a whole industry of companies that any of my competitors will know that are sort of network businesses that have a marketplace of a bunch of networks, expert networks, sorry, that you can go out and hire and speak to them to learn more about any industry, almost industry experts or customers. And so we use some combination of all of the above.
Mm. I wonder, so like since like you mentioned about like speaking to a customer, I feel like that's one part of the job, but like on the other hand, like how do you um I guess like spend your day on like which subsector to focus on? Like do you spend like call it like 6 months on healthcare AI and then like not 6 months obviously, but like maybe call it 6 weeks
Yeah.
on a particular subsector? Or like do you feel like you have to whenever you encounter like a really substantial company and then you dive into diligence for a particular company for X amount of time. Uh, how
That's a
do
good
you kind of like,
question.
yeah.
That's a really good question. I would say historically, growth stage firms have been very generalist,
Mhm,
meaning even from cybersecurity to data to horizontal AI and vertical AI and
mhm,
everything in between, and consumer investing, believe it or not,
mhm,
Grace. There's firms out there and peers of mine that spend, that's incredible to me because I wouldn't know the first thing about consumer investing at this point.
mhm,
I would say at Sapphire, we've tried to specialize a bit more where we focus on broadly speaking either applications or infrastructure. And I drive a lot of the application, kind of middleware applications, automation, investing.
mhm,
Um, Now, within that, yes, we do have certain people and individuals who do spend actually 40, 50% of their time just in healthcare. I probably spend about 20% of my time. And I try to be, just because I've made investments in many different places, dangerous enough across a lot of these subsectors, while having certain other people on our team go very deep in a few that I collaborate with, in addition to our broader expert network, in order to get up to speed pretty quickly. But I would say, I probably spend 2/3, 70%, maybe even of my time in just more broadly enterprise software, horizontal, vertical, almost everything has
mhm,
an AI or automation angle now.
mhm.
And then 30% in some healthcare or sort of fintech arenas.
Mm. I like really like that you're collaborative within the internal firm to like, have some sort of like subject experts and
Yeah.
like to kind of like collaborate on deal with. And I wonder like since like previously I want to like go back to maybe like some of your investments. So like I feel like a lot of the investment in the AI realm, not only having smaller startups to compete with, but also the incumbents. How do you kind of like figure out who would be the category leader in a particular space?
Oh, wow. That's tough. The earlier you go, the harder it is
Uh-huh.
to figure out.
Mhm,
I went earlier on Supio because I just spent, to your point earlier, a lot of time in that particular space. I'd heard a lot of the pain points from the customers and what they were really seeking, and I was always already looking for that. And so when I met Jerry, it felt like, oh gosh, this is right exactly what I think could work. Could be wrong because like these spaces are so early that sometimes the customers don't even know.
mhm,
Um, I think the later you go, you look for, the quality of customer logos that they have. Are they winning? Whether it's in the technology space, the lighthouse logos we like to call it, right? That everyone else sort
mhm,
of follows, the smartest
mhm,
folks out there. But also, are they also winning non-technology, large enterprise businesses? That shows category leadership, or at least early innings of it. Are they growing faster and more efficiently than the other players and then the competitors in the space? If everyone's between 20 and 80 of ARR, where do they fall, and just financially, how do they look like? And then finally, I hate to keep repeating it, but how good is the team, right?
mhm,
Beyond just the metrics, how good does the team feel from a commercial go-to-market perspective, from an R&D perspective, but particularly for the founders, just from a leadership culture, DNA perspective, how good and how much does that resonate with us?
I like what you said about like, since like it's a little bit like, so I feel like for earlier stage there is maybe less of like a um like it's less like obvious, but however when it comes to later stage there's a lot more like logo or like a lot of these like obvious benchmarks that you couldn't kind of like lean towards, and like the
Yes.
lighthouse logos that can kind of like let the other companies follow. And I wonder, I want to maybe like jump back into like the broader view of like the AI um investment realm. Like, so like since like Sapphire made a billion commitment to invest in like AI powered enterprise tech startups, and what's like the general overall approach for deploying this capital?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, I mean, we haven't invested to date in the foundation models. Just a little bit aspects
Mhm,
financially about those
mhm,
businesses that may not match up perfectly with where we
mhm,
want to invest, given the capital intensity
mhm,
of those businesses. But for us, everything else is fair game. We want to invest in enterprise software businesses that are obviously leveraging AI,
mhm,
whether they're AI native or not, to solve real and durable pain points for customers. These can be at the ops or enablement layer, like I said, the picks and shovels, so to speak, whether it's security or data or ops, up into application layer businesses. I do think there's a nuance. Like I said, these are system of work businesses. If you recall, Grace, there was this whole notion in SaaS 1.0, I guess, that was sort of system of record, system of engagement that sits on top of system of record, and then maybe system of intelligence. And you kind of had that in all these categories that feel like that's almost collapsed. That paradigm doesn't exist anymore, where it's almost like just a system of work. If you're a great AI company, you're going to almost do the work and provide the work, the whole
mhm,
product, not 10% of the work to the end customer. And in order to do so, and because the market is so early, there are some inherent services or tinkering involved with getting it sort of right. I think we've learned to accept some of that as we look at sort of new businesses. That might be reflected in slightly less gross margin. But again, like I said, we try to look at the headcount, the plan to scale that gross margin going forward. So that might look a little bit different than SaaS 1.0, for example. But other than that, a lot of our thinking and measurement, when we sit around a table, we don't talk about is it AI company or not. We talk about the same measurement. The other thing I would say, actually, it's an interesting question, is two more specific things. One, I think from a founder perspective, we're tending to like more product technical oriented founders that can still communicate really well and all of that things I mentioned earlier, but that are constantly tinkering, that have shown an ability to weave and innovate almost constantly. They're constantly adjusting and changing their product because the underlying technology here and the customer needs are moving so fast that it's not like I developed a software solution and I'm just going to add a button to it every year on these feature releases. You have to be evolving and tinkering and dodging and moving your product. So we kind of, in the conversations I had with Jerry or Arvin, I mean, that's the mentality that I got. And I saw how the velocity of their product organization, the ability to change something completely fundamental to their product because they're seeing the technology is changing. That's critical. Having no religion around things like that. And then the other thing is, partnership and CX mentality. This kind of goes back to my services point, because true enterprises were so early in adopting
mhm,
AI, they're just trying to figure it out. Yes, Microsoft is telling them exactly what to
mhm,
do, but they kind of are like, I don't know if that works. And someone else tell me, help me stitch this together,
mhm,
help me show real value of AI to my CEO or CIO or to the board. So you need these businesses to have a great chief customer officer, or to the CEO to be almost a great chief customer officer in onboarding, in holding sometimes the customers, these enterprise customers' hands and showing them real value. At the startup realm, you can do something small and that's a sort of a widget and that can really grow fast. But at the enterprise layer, that more thought partnership and hey, kind of the art of the imagination, and let me show you what can be, and I'll help you sort of get there. I think that's kind of an important sort of aspect as well of these companies and these teams.
mm. Something that you just said, like the two things about like quickly change or like adapt into the newest technology and like becoming kind of like the chief customer officer for your own startup, like really resonate with me. And I wonder for like the CEO to like quickly adopt the new technology, how do you advise on like the company, for example, let's say you invested in like early on, but like they were not like they did not like go through the AI boom yet, but like now they're like trying to add AI to
Yeah.
whatever they're doing. Like how should they go about something like that?
It's incredibly hard. We all have a myriad of companies. Most of all
Mhm,
of any VC's companies are
mhm,
SaaS companies that were born in 2014 or 17 or 19 before the boom, so to speak, right? And we're all advising our companies, hey, what's our AI story? I
mhm,
think the truth of the matter is it's so difficult because really the right way to do it is to start from scratch in a way for the most part, at least for a big part of your product surface area, because you have to almost reimagine what your UI and UX might look like if you were born again as an AI company. And that might be very disruptive to all the technology and the underlying platform and architecture and everything and all the features that you've built already. I also think that the business models are different.
mhm,
A lot of the AI businesses are, more consumption, more usage based, more output. Hey, here's how much work I've done for you, right? As an agent or otherwise. Whereas maybe the prior generation of SaaS companies were maybe more seat based. So is there some cannibalization and disruption there that occurs? What I'm seeing the most successful companies do is layer it in to their product where it makes sense in some pretty powerful but unique ways, and then maybe there's like a new product surface area, um, right outside of the core product that's like their AI sort of module that's very specific and crisp, but that to honestly market the heck out of it. The whole
mhm,
the whole company should be an AI company because that helps you generate pipeline, and once you get in, you have an excuse to get in. It's okay if not your whole product is all about AI. You may still have a great product that can generate a lot more value than even the AI kid down the street, but at
mhm.
least get your foot in the door by having a really crisp and meaningful and authentic story still about AI.
Mm. I that kind of brought me to like another question around AI, which is like, where are we in the hype cycle? Or like, do you feel like, since I feel like every company is an AI company these days, like I'm not saying it as like a sarcasm or something. It's literally I feel like because of AI became the internet. So technically every company is leveraging AI if you're using a ChatGPT or like anything in your business.
Yeah,
How do you think about like where are we in the hype cycle, or
yeah.
if we are in a hype cycle?
It's a great question. It's interesting. A couple of years ago, sitting in 2022, it wasn't just the post ZERP era and the market
Mhm,
decline, but I felt as jaded as ever, having done this for a long time, seeing the third generation of a SaaS tool selling the same sort of widget into the enterprise. And I've seen 50 of these companies before, and this one has 10% differentiation on top. I was kind of waiting for a platform or technology shift or something.
mhm,
And I didn't know it would come so fast and furious, frankly. And so I'm as excited as ever. I think it depends. Listen, if you're an Nvidia or some investor there and you're wondering, oh my gosh, the capex spend and when will it turn into real revenue? Yes, we're all wondering that, and that creates some trepidation. But sitting more at the application layer, I can tell you, I do see companies that are up to and at least trying to crack some incredible problems, from customer support to AI, coding generation to others. The durability of that company and will OpenAI get better? Of course, we have those questions, but it's happening. And the profile of these businesses, the growth, the efficiency of these software businesses that I'm seeing, let alone some of the customer value and customer love that I'm seeing, is incredible. So, no, even today, relative to 1 year ago, the fall of 2023, the number of really interesting AI businesses that I'm seeing, from 3 million of ARR to 30 million of ARR, in that sort of really juicy
mhm.
growth expansion stage, is really, really exciting. And so for me, while different layers of the stack and certain investors may feel overhyped and a little bit worried, at Sapphire, we're as excited as ever.
I like I feel like it's definitely certainly like you said, it's really exciting. I didn't really see the AI wave coming this huge, this quick either. I wonder what are like something that you would ask every CEO that like you have like invested, or like I guess like what are the answer or like the traits that you're looking for from these kind of like answers?
From AI CEOs?
Like from I guess like from generally like since
Mm,
like, we talk about like you have a really great track record on like both the AI side, also generally in the SaaS side, like, when you invest in like a Square or like a
yeah,
Monday.com,
yeah.
what are something that you would ask like the CEO kind of answer that you're like, wow, that's something that I've been kind of like looking for?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mentioned a lot of it prior. I mentioned comes down to sort of the clarity of communication, clarity in how charismatic the
Mhm,
CEO is, if she or he can really sell and articulate what might be a very complex story in a compelling fashion to me and my partners, then that person can probably do that to all the other important stakeholders.
mhm,
That in and of itself, Grace, goes a long way,
mhm,
and can be differentiated because then you have talent density,
mhm,
you get the best of the best employees and engineers, and your lead just compounds over time. I look at founders. I like to ask them, say, "What's your motivation? Where do you see yourself? 5 years, 7 years, 10 years? What do you want to build?" From there, you can kind of see their heads, their wheels turning, and you can see how big they're trying to think and how excited they are about the bigness and the long-term nature of that vision, or does that sort of exhaust them, and are they only thinking about one foot ahead of the other a little bit? That's a little different. I also like to ask CEOs about competitors to see, are they overly concerned about another competitor? They shouldn't be dismissive, but they shouldn't also, my view, be overly concerned. You can control your own destiny. There's a old adage and saying in our industry, which
mhm,
is most startups die from. It's going to sound very morbid, but suicide and not homicide.
mhm.
Meaning, you kind of it's within your control, right, to survive and thrive. It has nothing to do about a competitor out there that's going to kill your business. And so I like companies that are very sure of themselves. Roy and Iran from Monday.com had incredibly stiff competition. Asana was bigger than them, and Airtable and a bunch of other companies. And those are incredible generational businesses, but they succeeded in their own right in spades, despite having a ton of non-technology companies, no one in the Silicon Valley really using them, a ton of international customers, and they continue to just march to their own beat, do things their own way. And they were very confident in that, and I really appreciate that as well. That shows me that these founders have a conviction of doing it their way, right or wrong. That at least they have that conviction, and when they're hit with a ton of bricks, because every company is, even at 100 million of ARR, they're going to find their way around it, and that's what really matters.
Oh, wow. I really like that. Like, instead of like focusing on your competitor, you really should pay attention to what you are doing, like what
Yep.
your customer are saying, or like find your own set of customers than like just trying to go after like the biggest competitor have to offer. So like I wonder, so since I want to be mindful of the time, I have like one question in the AI realm and then one question about the personal development, and then we'll jump into the quick 1 minute fire round. So one other question is like for the AI founder, like the SaaS founders that are listening, what is one piece of advice that you would give them in terms of fundraising or building a great company?
Hmm. Um, I would say it would go back to what I said earlier, around the why now and why different. Just because you're an AI company isn't enough anymore. There's probably 6 companies that look just like you already, and will look just like you. So what's truly different about your approach, your team, how you attract great team members, the problem set that you're focused on, that's going to be really different. I would say also think about what's something non AI, not that has nothing to do with LLMs or RAG, that you're doing. Is it the way, like I said, you're solving for security and data privacy, which are really hard things to solve for, that Glean, for example, has, and permissioning in the enterprise. What's a non AI? Are you structuring unstructured data in a really innovative way, that the way Supio is? These are sort of non-native AI sort of things, but they're actually very, very hard to solve. So I like asking that as well.
I like that. And one piece of advice is like I feel like you have accomplished a lot as an investor. Like, you have been at Sapphire for over like 10 years, and you are on the growth 40 under 40. People inform me that's a very legit list. And I wonder, how do you think about like like developing your own career in investing? And what's your advice for like people who are like early on in their journey?
Yeah, early on in your journey, don't overthink it.
Mhm.
We all have our palette, we all have our lens. I remember the first few investments I made, I was very scared. Am I going to fail or not? You just have to step outside there and do it. If you have supportive partners and a supportive firm you're working for, you're going to make more mistakes than you will be right. So don't overthink it. I think later on in my career, I just want to work with founders and companies that, really excite me. Valuation is obviously very important, but I think that is more important. Who are the founders that are going to change the world? Who are the founders that when I leave them, I learn just as much, if not more, from them than they do from me? They make me sort of tell my wife all about the company over dinner. That to me is what helps me grow and evolve and stay excited in this business.
Um, I love that. Like, just like, basically the advice is like, just do it. So, what's your, so where are the last 1 minute fire round for you? What's your favorite book?
Oh God. Well, I recently read the Elon Musk book, so I'll go with that one.
Mhm. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
My father.
Is he an investor or a
He
founder?
engineer, founder, and investor.
Oh, love that. That's like a whole
Yeah,
Silicon Valley
there's a lot.
trajectory.
There's a lot. There's a lot there.
uh,
Yeah.
who would you invite to your dinner party?
Oh, Jensen. Why not?
Where can we find you outside of work?
With my kids at the park.
Last question. What's your favorite SaaS company?
Oh, I can't pick favorites. I can't pick favorites. I
uh,
cannot because I'll obviously have to go with some of mine in the portfolio, but I can't pick favorites. So
just all the portfolios.
yeah.
But anyway, Rajiv, well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun conversation.
Thank you, Grace. Appreciate it. Had a fun time.
Okay, let me quick